Chapter 18, Residuals. The old woman from the Kyoto market sat at her breakfast table and ate in silence. She took a bite of salmon and a sip of white miso soup, then absently lifted her hand to light the lantern beside her out of habit. Nothing happened. Her hand froze. For a moment, she stared at the lantern as the reality of it settled in. This was not her life anymore. She reached for the Muggle matches she had bought recently and struggled for a second to remember how they worked. Her shoulders sagged, her head dropped. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why me?" Then, with a sudden flash of anger, she pointed at the lantern and said, "Light!" The wick gave a weak glow, sparked once, and died. Her eyes widened. She hurried to a cabinet and pulled out a long, thin box. Inside was a beautiful cherry wood wand with pink cherry blossom inlay. She lifted it, aimed it at the lantern, and whispered, "Tuma!" The lantern burst into light. Hermione was alone in the Ministry Potions lab, studying a sample of purple powder on a glass dish beneath a Muggle microscope. A knock sounded at the door. When she opened it, John Dawlish stood there with Tobias. "Here's your squib," Dawlish said with a sneer. Hermione said nothing, though her face tightened. Dawlish left Tobias in the lab, but not before casting a sealing charm over the doorway to prevent anyone with a trace from passing through. As soon as he was gone, Hermione turned to Tobias. "Don't listen to him." Tobias gave a small shrug. "It's fine. I get it. If he saw it from the other side, maybe he'd understand. If he were the one with no power." Hermione looked at him steadily. "There are other ways to help people understand besides taking away their magic." Tobias blinked, then lifted a hand. "That's not what I meant." "I know," Hermione said quickly. Her tone softened. "I know. Speaking of taking magical power, look at this." She gestured to the microscope. Tobias leaned in and looked through it. "The purple powder. What about it?" "It's breaking down," Hermione said. "The compound isn't permanent. It lasted longer than the first batch you made, but it's still breaking down." Tobias's face changed as he understood what that meant. So nobody was permanently affected, and Diagon Alley was a failure. Hermione straightened at once. "Failure? I wouldn't say that." He seemed to realize how that sounded. "I didn't mean it like that. I just mean it's a good thing it failed, for everyone else, I mean. I don't like making mistakes." Hermione gave him a small look that said she understood the awkwardness. "I got it." She bent down and pulled a glass box from beneath the work table. Inside sat a golden snitch and an empty vial. The snitch fluttered back and forth in the box, batting against the glass. "We found this at your workstation," Hermione said. "It had been sitting in the evidence lab for 3 weeks. They thought it was something in the ventilation system. They only brought it up this morning, so I started testing the old powder against it. That's when I found the compound breaking down." She met his eyes. "That's hopeful, for all the people who were affected." Tobias tried to hold himself together, but the frustration and shame behind his expression were becoming harder to hide. He stood abruptly. That's really good news. Sorry, my stomach feels a bit off. Can I use the water closet?" Hermione gave a quick, sympathetic smile. "You don't have to ask. You can just go when you need to. The water closet, I mean." Tobias turned away before she could see his face. Later, Harry, Ron, Luca, and Yukimi took a portkey to Kinkakuji, the Golden Pavilion, for Westerners. When the transport ended, they stood on a tiny island surrounded by a calm lake and 2 cherry trees. The gold on the upper floors of the temple shone brilliantly in the morning light. "Beautiful," Ron said. Yukimi smiled and held out her hand. "Take my hand." The group joined hands and apparated to an alleyway in Kyoto's Gion district. Yukimi checked an address on a piece of paper and led them a short distance to a tea shop called Matcha Magic. Inside, an older woman was cleaning the store. At first glance, it looked as though she was sitting in a chair and directing the work with her wand, while mops, brooms, and other cleaning supplies did the job on their own. Then she spotted the Aurors at the door. She startled, and everything in the room went still. Her expression changed the instant she realized who they were. A bright smile spread across her face, and she laughed with delight. She swept her wand upward, and the cleaning supplies sprang back to life, continuing their work. She turned toward them and gestured proudly at the brooms and sponges as if to say, "Look what I can do." Ron understood first. "Are you Mrs. Yanaki?" She nodded. "She's got her magic back?" Ron said. Yukimi spoke briefly to Mrs. Yanaki in Japanese. The older woman answered at length. "She says she just got her magic back this morning." Yukimi translated. "That's good," Luca said. "That means it isn't permanent." Harry nodded. "Let's get this to Brunner and Muller in Geneva. They need to know." Back in the Ministry Potions lab, Tobias went into the water closet and splashed cold water on his face. He looked up at himself in the mirror with an expression of disgust, as though the reflection alone had offended him. He slapped his palm against the sink harder than he meant to, and the sound echoed through the small room. "Are you all right in there?" Hermione called from the lab. Tobias shut his eyes for a second, then answered, "I'm fine. Drop the soap." Hermione continued, her voice louder through the door. "I sent a sample of your powder to a good friend of mine. He teaches herbology at Hogwarts. I wanted to see whether he could make a botanical remedy for the anti-magical effects." Tobias stared at his reflection, still and silent. Later that night, back in the Rook Manor kitchen, Tobias and Rucus apparated into place. Tobias turned away from him at once. The potion failed. Ruckus moved around to face him. His voice was calm, almost matter of fact. It did its job, he said. It made its point.